He compared its seamless lines to the unbroken metal of the spaceships of science fiction. Firmly ingrained in French culture, it was the vehicle for visiting state dignitaries. De Gaulle gave Nixon the full Citroen treatment in 1969 with his special and very enlarged DS presidential model. In fact, de Gaulle wouldn't be driven around in anything else because he owed his life to a DS. In 1962, his car was sprayed with bullets by terrorists, and only because the DS could be driven with 2 flat tires was he able to make his escape. A bullet passed just 8 inches away from that famous nose. And it's still a symbol of everything Gallic the world over. The natural choice to evoke a nostalgic journey through rural France for this British advert for a British bank. I can't think of any other cars that so perfectly embody the national characteristics of the people that made them, like the Citroen DS. It is so terribly, terribly French. Think about it. It's arrogant, yet soft and easygoing. Chic and stylish, yet somehow strangely conservative. Wildly eccentric, yet also in a way very, very practical. And when British motorists bought the DS in the 60s and 70s, and there weren't that many of them, they were paying homage to one of the most idiosyncratic and quirky races in the world. In those days, in England, if you wanted a DS, you had to be a serious Francophile. Like Jane and Alan Clark, who have an enduring love affair with their ultra-rare Décapotable. It's one of only a few hundred convertible DS's made by the French coach builder Citroen.
Lovely. It's absolutely lovely because it just simply holds the road so beautifully. It's very, very light. It's got a very light steering. You hardly have to move the wheel. It's just a joy. It's just lovely. It's mine. It's registered in my name, and it was the last one made in the Citroen factory. And Madame Citroen used to appear from her little booth when we used to go and see how it was getting on, really, see how the colours were coming on. He likes me to drive it, but he really prefers me to Macri so that he can drive it.
It's a personal car for Jane and I. We only use it on our holidays, which we always take in France. It has these beautiful looks. It's got streamlined, like some marvellous giant fish of the Pacific that's completely undated. It looks very, very smart even now. And what I love about it is its handling. It's the best combination of comfort and really good handling that you can get anywhere. And of course, on bad French roads, with nid de poule, as they so expressively call them, and quick changes of camber and bad verges, broken verges, and a lot of puddles and rain and so on, it's unbeatable, the Citroen, really. You can't get past them and you can't shake them off if they're driven by a determined Frenchman. My wife owns this car and she does get to drive it. I mean, she's very kind to me in 100 different ways, and she lets me drive it, but to tell you the truth, when she's driving me, I'm almost happier and more relaxed when I'm driving it myself. She doesn't throw it about the way I sometimes do under temptation.
British buyers hardly took to the DS in a big way, but those who did tended to be cerebral, wealthy professionals who appreciated the DS's designer individuality and who didn't balk at the car's steep price and high running costs.
And my destination makes it worth the while.
The model they admired the most was the Safari, one of the biggest estates of its day.
Still another mile.
Ideal transport for large middle-class families and perhaps the original people carrier.
Something good in everything.
Wonderful to look at and a technical tour de force, the DS cost an awful lot of money. £2,000. Yet a Rover 2000 or a Triumph 2000 were only half as much. And if you wanted to spend a wee bit more and go seriously upmarket, you could drive home in a spanking new Mercedes 250 SE. So you can understand why, in Britain at least, the DS never broke any sales records. In fact, it only really sold well in France. Most of the 1.5 million made over 20 years were sold there. In other countries, the car's complexity fell on stony ground. Buyers were intimidated rather than impressed. But some British motorists actually found the car's charming idiosyncrasies rather useful, not least that special suspension.
I was driving through Kingston in Surrey one day, and in a torrential downpour. And we came into a dip in the road, and at the bottom of the dip was under a railway bridge, and there was a queue of cars. And they were all going through like this very slowly, you know, almost shaking like a dog when they got out of the puddle, because it was about that deep, you see. So when I came to the head of the queue, I just went, and I put my suspension up, revved up, and the suspension went onto its top setting, and I went through like a tank, you know, straight through, to everyone going, oh, because I just put the suspension down as soon as I got out of the puddle, and on I went. It was lovely.
And raising the suspension made changing the wheels an absolute breeze, even if you did have to take the rear wing off first. The DS was so advanced that in 1960 it was chosen by the Transport and Road Research Laboratory as a test bed for a sort of autopilot for cars.
I've driven this car for hundreds of miles without touching the steering wheel.
A driverless steering system picked up electronic signals from sensors buried in the track and literally steered itself.
We used the Citroen DS because it had the only high-pressure hydraulic system which we could use to automatically steer the car. We could drive the car up to 80 miles an hour without touching the steering wheel, and 60 miles an hour in the snow, when it was more stable than the average driver.
Today, a well-preserved DS commands less than £5,000, but being at the cutting edge of automotive technology didn't stop them rusting away very quickly indeed. Rebuilding an old one can be a life sentence.
It's a Citroen DS23, 1974. First registered in 75 and one of the last to hit the English roads. One owner from new, low mileage, 68,000, and quite an attractive registration number, but needs a lot doing to it. This particular one is rather worse than I dared hope. It basically needs rebuilding from the front seats backwards. I would have thought with a little bit of help from my friends, and fortunately in this parish I've got some very good ones, it could be done in a couple of years, something like that.
Elegant, fragile, eccentric, but tragically misunderstood, it's hard not to be passionate about the Citroen DS. One of the world's most distinctive, complicated, but ultimately romantic cars.
I think, if anything, it's the same as the Rolls, actually, Rolls-Royce. Anything that is of a superb design lives. And this lives, you know, it's so beautifully crafted, and the suspension, you know, is the best in the world.
Styling is very characteristically French. What I love about the Citroen D series is that both in engineering and in styling, they are totally and individually French. And they were really the last expression of French genius in automobile engineering, I think.
A high-speed edition of Top Gear this week has Michael Schumacher in the driving seat of the new Ford Mustang. That's on Thursday evening at 8:30 here on BBC Two.